You think your sense of right and wrong belongs to you. It does not. At least, not as much as you want to believe. Most people imagine morality as something deeply personal, something built slowly, something chosen, something earned through thought, pain, experience, reflection. But that is not how it usually works. Most of your moral instincts were installed long before you ever examined them. By family, by culture, by religion, by school, by the people around you, by the groups you needed in order to survive. And once a belief is repeated enough inside a group, it stops feeling borrowed. It starts feeling obvious. That is the part that should disturb you. Because the most dangerous moral shifts in human history did not begin with villains. They began with ordinary people slowly absorbing the values of the people around them until those values felt indistinguishable from conscience. This is not a character flaw. It is a psychological mechanism. And once you see it, you start noticing it everywhere. In the 1950s, psychologist Solomon Asch ran a famous experiment. He brought people into a room and showed them a simple visual task. 1 line on the left, 3 lines on the right. The answer was embarrassingly clear. But the room was rigged. Everyone else had been instructed to give the same wrong answer. And then something strange happened. A huge number of participants went along with the group, not because they were blind, not because they were stupid, because hearing the same answer from enough people made their own judgment start to feel unstable. Think about that. A room full of strangers was enough to make people doubt their own eyes. Now imagine what a group can do when the question is not about line lengths, but about loyalty, justice, humiliation, violence, truth, or who deserves sympathy. That is where conformity stops being interesting and starts becoming dangerous. A few years later, Stanley Milgram pushed this even further. His obedience experiments asked ordinary people to administer what they believed were painful electric shocks to another person. They were uncomfortable. They hesitated. They laughed nervously. They protested. And then many of them kept going. Why? Not because they were sadistic, because an authority figure calmly told them to continue, because the structure of the room made obedience feel normal, because disobedience felt socially harder than harm. That is the horror of it. Most people do not need to be turned evil. They just need an environment that makes compliance feel reasonable. And if that sounds extreme, look at your own life. Look at workplaces where dishonesty becomes efficiency. Look at friend groups where cruelty becomes humor. Look at online spaces where outrage becomes identity. Look at communities where doubt becomes betrayal. No one wakes up one morning and says, "I want to become morally warped." That is not how it happens. It happens through repetition, through belonging, through the silent pressure to stay aligned with the people who surround you. One joke you do not challenge. One lie you excuse. One line you cross because everybody else already crossed it. One compromise that feels too small to matter. Then another. Then another. And eventually you are defending something the earlier version of you would have recognized immediately as wrong. That drift rarely feels dramatic. That is why it works. Psychologists call part of this normative social influence. You change not because someone physically forces you, but because the cost of social rejection starts to feel heavier than the cost of betraying your own judgment. Belonging is powerful. In fact, it is powerful enough to reshape what feels moral in the first place. And that is the deeper problem. The real threat is not just that groups pressure you. The real threat is that groups can rewrite your inner voice and make the rewrite sound like wisdom. Once that happens, you do not feel manipulated. You feel correct. You feel clear. You feel righteous. That feeling of certainty is exactly what makes group morality so dangerous. Because when a belief has been handed to you by the crowd, it does not arrive wearing a label that says borrowed. It arrives disguised as conviction. That is how moral climates are built. Every group has one. Every workplace, every ideology, every religion, every social circle, Every algorithmic echo chamber online. Each one creates its own invisible map of what is acceptable, what is admirable, what is weak, what is shameful, what deserves punishment, what deserves silence. And if you live inside that map long enough, you stop seeing it as a map. You start seeing it as reality. There's a term often used in politics for part of this process: the Overton window, the range of beliefs a group considers acceptable. But the unsettling part is not that the window moves. It is how quietly it moves, an inch at a time, a phrase at a time, a joke at a time, a justification at a time. Nothing feels dramatic while it is happening. Then one day you look around and realize the unthinkable has become normal. And the people defending it do not sound like monsters. They sound calm, reasonable, confident, even moral. That is what should make you pause, because history is full of ordinary people doing terrible things without ever seeing themselves as terrible. Not because they lacked intelligence, because they stopped examining the moral atmosphere around them, because they outsourced judgment, because the group was thinking for them. Hannah Arendt wrote about this after studying how ordinary bureaucrats participated in mass atrocity during the Second World War. Her conclusion was deeply unsettling. The danger was not always hatred, not always madness, not always some theatrical form of evil. Sometimes it was something colder: thoughtlessness. People who had accepted the moral logic of the system so completely that personal judgment had gone quiet. That is the real warning. You do not lose yourself all at once. You lose yourself every time you let the group do your moral thinking for you. So how do you protect yourself from that? First, treat moral discomfort as valuable information. If something feels slightly wrong, pay attention before the group explains it away. Because groups are very good at producing stories that make bad behavior sound necessary, strategic, efficient, funny, or deserved. Second, expose yourself to people who think differently, not so you can copy them, not so you can perform open-mindedness, so you can test whether your beliefs still survive outside the environment that produced them. And third, learn to tolerate the social pain of disagreement, because that pain is real. The moment you resist a group, your body often reads it like danger, rejection, isolation, loss. That does not mean you are wrong. It means the mechanism is active. It means belonging is trying to overpower judgment in real time. And most people surrender there. They soften, they nod, they stay quiet. They tell themselves this one compromise does not matter. But character is built in exactly those moments. Not when morality is easy, when it is expensive. You do have values, real ones, but keeping them requires more than sincerity, more than intelligence, more than good intentions. It requires the ability to step back from the crowd, hear the pressure, feel the cost, and still ask the question most people stop asking. Do I believe this because it is right? Or because I need the group to keep loving me if I say yes?